In this video, we'll tell you all you need to know about the most famous SBS missions from the Falklands Mission in 1982 to the hostage rescue in Afghanistan in 2007. 1. The Falklands, Fanning Head. When the Argentinian invaders took over the Falklands, the British launched a campaign to recover the islands in 1982. An amphibious force had to dispatch troops into San Carlos Bay, where the Falklands had to be retaken by the British. The mission is famously known as the Falklands Fanning Head, as the Fanning Head was a ridge overlooking San Carlos waters that was being used as a significant defense position by the Argentinians. The Fanning Head position of the Argentinian invaders was a threat to the SBS, as they were heavily loaded with weapons and covered the approaches of the landing areas of the SBS forces. On the 21st of May 1982, the mission of clearing the Fanning Head was put into action. The SBS detected the location of the Argentinians using thermal imaging, a significant tool for such a high-risk espionage mission. A Wessex helicopter was used to deliver an assault force into the neighboring areas, and about 25 extensively trained SBS soldiers armed with GPMGs launched their attack on the Fanning Head. Two of the distinguished personnel accompanying the SBS forces were Captain Rod Bell, a psychological operations expert who was tasked to communicate with the Argentinians and convince them to surrender, and Captain Hugh McManus, a naval gunfire forward observation expert. Captain McManus was also part of the 148 Commando Battery, another British Special Forces unit that helped the SBS and SAS during the Falklands mission. While McManus directed artillery fire onto the Fanning Head, Captain Bell waited for the right time to call out to the opponents to surrender. However, they were met by machine gun fire as a response, and the SBS had to counterattack. The mission was successful, with the SBS sustaining only light injuries. From the 60 Argentinians holding position at the Fanning Head, 11 were killed in the crossfire, 6 had surrendered, while the rest fled for their lives. 2. Gulf War I, behind Iraqi lines. The main objective of this mission was to stop the Scud missile attacks dispatched by Saddam Hussein targeting Saudi Arabia and Israel. If the missiles weren't stopped, the resulting conflict would affect the West Arab coalition adversely. At first, Allied aircraft forces were dispatched to track the location of the Scuds, but as the missiles were hidden under bridges and in barns, they were unable to track them. The stakes were high for this operation, as it could trigger a global war which would affect large numbers due to nuclear warfare being involved. So, the UK Special Forces had to be very cautious of their strategy. They dispatched the SAS in the West Iraqi desert, while the SBS were tasked to locate and cut the fiber optic cables facilitating Scud missile attacks. The mission was carried out at night to avoid detection, as 36 SBS operators were landed 40 miles south of Baghdad. 2 Chinooks from the RAF Special Forces carried these operators from Saudi to Iraq. After landing, the SBS split into 2 teams, one to handle the demolition and the other to protect the demolition team and the helicopters from attack. The teams were alert, as they could be spotted with their location so close to the Iraqi capital. The helicopters kept their engines running with the rotors down to minimize noise, but to be able to take off immediately. Hours of hard work later, the demolition team was able to dig out the cables and fuse them with explosives. In record time, the teams returned to the helicopters and left the area, which was blown up shortly after, demolishing the cables. The mission was successful. 3. Afghanistan, Kala-i-Janggi Fort Uprising. The SBS excels in mission on water, but their capability was proved as they took part in the prolonged missions in landlocked Afghanistan as well. The uprising of Kala-i-Janggi Fort is a testament to the significant role they played in Afghanistan. In November 2001, a revolt by the Taliban prisoners kept at Kala-i-Janggi occurred as they stormed the armory and killed one of the CIA men interrogating them. Armed with AK-47s and RMPGs, they became a threat to the US and Northern Alliance forces. At that crucial time, an SBS team of 8 men was called in to assist the forces. The team arrived in Land Rovers and engaged the armed enemy. They played a vital role in keeping the enemy pinned to the fort because a breakout would result in further damage. To rescue the surviving CIA official who had fled for his life when his partner was killed, the SBS decided to enter the fort and rescue him. However, the official had managed to escape the fort and reached the HQ at Mazar. The SBS team leader was later nominated for the American Award of the Congressional Medal of Honor for his effort. During 8 days of raging fighting between the Taliban prisoners, the SBS and the US Special Forces called in airstrikes to hit the enemy. However, due to miscommunication, a Northern Alliance troop also fell victim to the airstrike. The prisoners were forced to retreat to the tunnels in the fort to escape the airstrikes. Later, these tunnels were poured down with fuel as Northern Alliance reinforcements arrived. The rebelling prisoners were flushed out by flooding the tunnels eventually, and finally, the uprising came to an end after days of struggle. 4. 2003 Iraq invasion. The SBS has 3 squadrons, C, S, and M. In the 2003 invasion of Iraq, M Squadron of SBS was designated to launch a heli-borne assault on several Iraqi oil facilities that would later be used as staging areas for the Special Forces. The first operation by the M Squadron at Al-Sahara was countered by the anti-Special Forces team Fedayeen in early March. The squadron barely escaped with the help of a Chinook and a US McDonnell Douglas F-15E Strike Eagle. The SBS then launched a second operation in northern Iraq from H-2 Air Base, but their location and objective were compromised by the Fedayeen units that followed them. At the location of Mosul, the Fedayeen units ambushed the SBS and launched machine gun fire as well as a T-72 tank. The SBS had to scatter to avoid falling into the trap and split into 3 teams. The first team had to abandon their Land Rovers and they mined the vehicles and fled. The second team was being hunted by Iraqi hunter forces, and the third was 2 personnel in an ATV rushing for the Syrian border. Amid heavy fire, the SBS managed to flee from their pursuers as 2 RAF Chinooks helped the teams. The ATV, carrying the 2 personnel, reached the Syrian border where they were held but later released after negotiation. Even in such a dangerous mission, there were no SBS casualties due to their quick action and successful escape. 5. Afghanistan Hunting Mullah Dadullah. The SBS has taken part in several missions in Afghanistan, and the hunt for Mullah Dadullah is one of the most significant missions. Mullah Dadullah was a senior military commander in the Taliban and a high-value target. Therefore, the Special Forces had to launch a covert operation to track him down and neutralize him to stop terrorist activities being carried out under his orders. The Taliban had recently exchanged prisoners with the Kabul authorities by using an Italian reporter and his aides as hostages. 2 senior commanders kept in custody were released in exchange for the hostages. These prisoners were being followed by Special Forces, with their location and calls being tracked, so they would reveal the location of Mullah Dadullah. After careful observation, Mullah Dadullah's location was revealed at Bahram Char, close to the Pakistani border. About 50 commandos from C Squadron of the SBS raided Dadullah's stronghold on the 12th of May 2007, and it was planned to go inside the fort to attack, as the airstrike couldn't guarantee Dadullah's elimination. The rest of C Squadron and Afghani soldiers were dispatched on RAF Chinooks to patrol the area around the fort and engage the enemy. Once inside, the SBS launched a firm attack despite the heavy fire and the strong defense put up by the 20 Taliban defenders. The operation at Bahram Char took 4 hours, but was successful, as Dadullah was killed in the attack and only 4 SBS were wounded, with no fatalities. 6. Afghanistan Hostage Rescue. Last but not least is the hostage rescue mission carried out by the SBS in September 2007. The hostages were 2 Italian soldiers who'd been missing for days and were believed to be taken captive by the Taliban military. To rescue them, an operation was launched, and the SBS commandos of C Squadron were designated to carry it to completion. The location of the hostages was tracked near Farah in western Afghanistan. The SBS was sent to the area in helicopters, and the airborne snipers attempted to take out the Taliban militia who were transporting the Italian hostages. The vehicles were disengaged by the sniper attack from above, and the SBS commandos landed on the ground to rescue the hostages from the kidnappers. According to some sources, Italian special forces were involved in the mission as they tracked the location of the hostages. However, it was the quick action from the SBS that resulted in the recovery of the Italian hostages. The hostages had received serious injuries, but they were rescued alive, and the mission was successful. In conclusion, these missions carried out by the SBS showcased their courage, extensive training, and patriotism to serve their country and the world in any way possible. Let's not forget the sacrifices made by these soldiers to solve conflicts and complete high-risk missions. If you were as awestruck by the feats of the SBS as we were, please like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of the heroes and history that shape our world.